any work which anyone does, someone who's doing the most according to some degrading work, even such a person, if he does it properly, true to his own conscience, that work itself is enough to evolve him to another state of consciousness. He does not have to practice yoga or practice puja. All these are external, extra things, which we do to help ourselves get into that particular mode of thinking.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Szabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. I've got a really wonderful show in store for today. Throughout the almost year that we've had this podcast, I've got to talk with a lot of people that I really appreciate and admire, and a few of the people that I've had the pleasure of speaking to on the show on a really personal level have really inspired me in many ways. And one of our guests today is one of those people. Her name is Vanamali Mataji. She is the founder of the Vanamali Gita Yoga Ashram in Rishikesh, India, where she gives regular talks and pujas and meditation sessions, as well as being involved in numerous social service projects. She's a prolific writer, having written many books, most of which I've read and love dearly. Some of them, like her Hanuman book, have had a serious impact on my life. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to have her on the show today. Mataji, welcome.
Thank you.
So could you tell us just a little bit about your life journey and how you ended up founding an ashram in Rishikesh? You used to be a professor, correct?
Not really. I ended up here entirely by the grace of Lord Krishna, and I really didn't have much choice in the matter.
So, there's so much that I find myself wanting to talk with you about. Your books are so wonderfully rich with story, and they've really inspired me in so many ways to tell stories and to share truth through story. And I could probably talk your ear off endlessly, but we in our talk a few days ago, we were talking about the Gita. I know it's something that you talk about a lot. It's also something that, people literally spend their entire lifetimes talking about. So it'll be, interesting to try to compact it into a single episode here. But I was wondering if you could, to set the stage a little bit for the Gita, if we could talk just briefly before we get into the text. What's the background of the text? Like where we could talk about its space in the Mahabharata, but what's the lead up to the text itself? Like, where are we in this great, huge epic of the Mahabharata before we get to the Bhagavad Gita?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I always give a very short outline of the Mahabharata before going into the actual teaching of the Gita, because one of the two first questions that anyone can ask when we start reading the Gita is, why did Lord Krishna, who was such a great proponent of the Sanatana Dharma, why did he ask prompt his disciple to violence? That is one question. Then the second question, of course, which is very obvious, why did he give this great big advice of all places in the battlefield? He could have chosen any other place. They had been together for most of their lives, and why did he? These two questions are outstanding. And we can only have an idea of these two questions if we know the background of the Gita. As you know, the Gita comes in the middle portion of the Mahabharata, and it was placed there especially because just to show the importance that Vyasa himself placed on this remarkable treatise. because the Gita is not just any sort of book. It is a practical handbook for spirituality. And that's one of the main things. That is, even in even in a battlefield, the ideas and the advice given in the Gita can work. And naturally, it can work in any sort of problems. If it could work on a battlefield, hopefully none of us are placed in such a position as Arjuna was when he had to battle with his own relations. So that fact is given prominence, because if that was so, that was the greatest dilemma anyone could face. And therefore, all our little dilemmas, which we all have to face all the time in our lives, could also be solved by the teachings of the Gita. So the background, as I said, is very important, because in the Mahabharata you find that it is a kind of a story of the Kuru dynasty, which existed in India many thousands of years ago. And the battle is between the two sets of cousins, one called the Kauravas and the other called the Pandavas. And the fact was that the Kauravas had tried to destroy the Pandavas, the 5 Pandavas, time and time again, by resorting to all sorts of things, like giving them poison, trying to burn them in a house especially made out of lac and inflammable material, by trying to drown them, by trying to many things, all the types of things they could do. They had tried to kill the Pandavas by some trick or other. And when that failed, and things they invited them to a game of dice. And there the Kauravas won by a trick, and defeated them only by a trick. And then they said that they took all their land away from them and banished them to the forest. The final edict was that they should go for 12 years to the forest, and the 13th year to be spent incognito at some town or other. And if the Kauravas could find them out in that 1 year, they would have to repeat the whole thing all over again. So, as I said, they were really tortured by these people. And at the end of the 13th year, when they demanded their kingdom back, Duryodhana said, the Kaurava leader Duryodhana said, well, if you want your kingdom, you'll have to fight for it, because I'm not going to part with anything which I've been enjoying for the past 13 years. So they were in fact forced into a war. Even before that, the Kauravas had insulted their wife also. But all this, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, was prepared to forgive. And he even sent Lord Krishna as ambassador to the court of the Kurus, because he said he would settle for anything, even if he was given 5 towns or 5 villages or 5 palaces. But Duryodhana's last word to Krishna himself, was that I am against all types of giving. Go back and tell that coward that if he wants to, I will not give him even 5 pinpoints of land. And if he wants to have his country back, he has to fight for it. So then he immediately declared war. And there was very little that the Pandavas could do to avoid this war. So this fact has to be understood very, very carefully before we can start the Gita, because only then will we be able to understand why Lord Krishna, one of the reasons, in fact, why Lord Krishna told his disciple Arjuna to fight.
And so with that stage being set, we kind of enter into the Gita, where the whole process is being narrated to us, and then we get to this, as you had mentioned, this dialogue between Krishna and the Prince Arjuna. And to me, the most pivotal or most impactful moment of the entire text, one that really has still stuck with me and still challenges me often is this moment towards the beginning where Arjuna is looking over the battlefield, and he drops his bow and he says, I can't fight. I can't do this. Those are my friends, my teachers, my family. And Krishna, the Godhead himself, walks up to him and says, instead of, I grew up in the West where the predominant religious tradition is, turn the other cheek, and it's 100% peace 100% of the time. Here we have the Godhead saying, no, Arjuna, pick up your bow. This is a righteous battle. This is what you were meant to do. And if you don't do it, who will? And that is such a powerful statement of not only just action, but being in the world and doing something because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's so powerful. I was wondering if you could flesh out that part of the Gita for us and tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, the fact that comes back to the point, why did Krishna encourage his disciple to fight? Because Arjuna gives forth all the normal ethical reasons which says that war is wrong, which of course it is. But then background, as I said, they have been forced into a war, but which not of their own making, but they were Kshatriyas. A Kshatriya is a ruler as well as a warrior. And his swadharma, or his path of action, which is most suited to his temperament, mind you, because action should be suited to your temperament. So your swadharma, or your path of action, should be according to your swabhava, or your nature. This is one of the basic things of the Gita. You are not forced into some action for which you are not mentally or physically qualified. That is the whole point. So Arjuna was a Kshatriya who was, he had lived a life of battle, like any soldier. After all, every soldier goes into, of his own will, he goes into an army, and he has and at the last moment, when he is actually faced with battle, if that soldier says, I'm sorry, I really can't do this, go into this battle. It was fine. I love that army life and so on, but this is something beyond me. What sort of a soldier, what sort of a evolutionary technique would that be? It is just a cowardly way out of something which he has known, mind you, he has known all his life, or up till now, he has known that he is going to fight this battle. Had he said that quite definitely, I will not fight, about at least a week ago, before Lord Krishna came as ambassador. And in fact, he didn't say that I will not fight, but he did try to make a attempt not to fight, but every attempt on their part, as I told you, was totally disregarded by Duryodhana. Now, at the critical moment for him to say he would not fight was really that of a coward. Not only that of a coward, the fact is that Arjuna, at any other moment, at any other place, he would have fought without any problem at all. But Krishna, in order to bring out the whole discourse of the Gita, deliberately, when Arjuna asks him to place the chariot in the middle of the field, in the no man's land where the two opposite hosts were lined up, Krishna deliberately placed it in front of Bhishma and Drona, Arjuna's grandsire and his guru. Had he placed the chariot in front of Duryodhana and the other Kauravas, Arjuna would never have gone through this psychological revolt against the war, because he was keyed up to fight with the Kauravas. But when he saw in front of him, not the Kauravas whom he hated, but his grandfather and his guru whom he loved and revered, that was the time when the whole psychological, weakness overcame him. And he said, I could not even hold up my bow. And he fell, he said, I gave all these ethical reasons by which one should not fight the war, which when we read that, we think we feel sorry for Arjuna, and we feel that Krishna should have agreed to his demands. But the fact is that Krishna is not talking to one aspect or part of society. He's talking to everybody in the society. And everybody is not, 99% of people are not contemplatives who will be quite happy to retire to a forest or an ashram or a monastery and sit and meditate on God. 99% of people are people who really fight a war in the battlefield of the world. It may not be on an actual battlefield with opposing armies, but all the time we are always in some sort of a dilemma. We are always in some sort of situation which we find difficult to overcome. So this is the 99% to whom Lord Krishna is talking, and Arjuna himself, looking at his own psychological makeup, as I said, he is a Kshatriya. He is a man who knows his duty as a Kshatriya is to free that land from the tyrants who have been dominating that land for so long, and also to keep up his word, which so many things were gone through in the Mahabharata. So he owed it to himself, he owes it to his family, he owed it to the citizens to fight this righteous war. But his position at that present moment is like that of a judge, for instance. A very good judge. The judge has been giving, judging people and giving even the sentence of electric chair or something. But whenever he's had a reason to do so, he has condemned them to the electric chair or condemned them to lifelong imprisonment or whatever. This man has been doing it all the time because that is his duty. He's a judge after all. He has to make judgments according to whatever this thing has been put before him. He has to judge according to that. Now, one day he is faced with his own son, who's been charged with murder of the first degree or third degree. I'm not too sure about this. But what would the judge do? The judge starts talking exactly as Arjuna talks, that capital punishment is no longer available in many countries. Why should we also take it away from from this constitution? And also, why should we condemn a man in cold blood who has done this action in hot blood, and many other things? It is against the law of nature. It's against manhood. We should show some consideration and concern for people and try to make them better, and so on and so forth. Exactly like Arjuna was speaking. But all this was set about only because it happened to be his own son. Till the previous day, when he was faced with other people's sons, all the people who came over were son of somebody or other. These type of ideas, noble ideas, never occurred to the judge. Now, of course, it is a very, very common thing. It's that we all are interested. We are happy, and we are unhappy at doing things against our own people. But Krishna is taking Arjuna to a level where a person has to do his duty without consideration of one's own personal likes or dislikes. This is a very high standard of evolution, which is not available to every human being. But this is the ideal which he is setting before Arjuna. He says, it's not that to the enlightened soul, every person is somebody's son or other. Every person is related in some way to someone or other. So just to stop doing one's duty because it happens to be my relation is not the correct way of doing anything at all. In the case of the judge should either give up the whole thing and say, I cannot, I will not, and I will not, I'm incapable of judging this case and retire from the scene, because he has given up all violence at all costs to anyone. Or his other, which most people would be able to do, is to do his Swadharma. Whatever it happens, whether it's his son or somebody else's son, he should have done his Swadharma. This is the highest state which Lord Krishna is trying to take Arjuna to. Then, of course, he goes on to talk about the highest state of the human being, and then the fact that we are all the immutable and immortal spirit within us, and we are not made up of these bodies alone. That was another aspect of the argument he gives to Arjuna.
Well, and so if we were to place ourselves in the story and become Arjuna and say that, okay, in our modern lives, we're all at various times struggling and fighting both an inner war and an outer war, as you said, hopefully never an actual physical, blood battle, but there's a battle for whether or not we're going to make this choice or do this work or commit to putting a project out there. Or I think of artists who are constantly in that struggle of having the bravery to put their creation out there in the world. How can what Krishna tells Arjuna help us then in our own lives when we're feeling like we want to give up, or we just can't possibly do the work that most of us at some point know that, like, hey, we've got to do this thing, but there's often that block of, well, man, I just can't do this because what if I fail, or what if I succeed, or what's going to happen? How does this teaching help us in that aspect of our lives?
This teaching is the only thing which can help anyone in any aspect of life in which they are placed in, because he never tells you to go to some high state and from which you can gain some spiritual, go and sit and meditate, or go and sit and stand on your head for some time, or practice all sorts of difficult yogas and so on. He says all you have to do in order to evolve is to do your present duty, this moment, this very moment. What is your duty now? It may be as somebody who, as a father, as a son, as a diplomat, as a doctor, whatever duty you have been placed in at that moment, that is the duty you have to do. And if you do that perfectly, again, it may be as a warrior, as a soldier, a common soldier, or an officer, whatever it is, that duty which is facing you at that moment, it is your duty. That is what he calls your swadharma, the dharma which is born with you. And that duty, if you do perfectly according to the dictates of your own conscience, and you feel happy that you have done your best, that is all that God expects of you. And you will evolve doing that very duty which sometimes it may not seem so such a pleasant one for you, but if you keep on doing it to the best of your ability, that is all that is needed for you to evolve further on this in this world of duality, and this world, conflicting world in which we are placed, and in which we are faced with so many problems and dilemmas.
And a lot of that, though, sits in quite stark contrast to the more Buddhist idea. Gautama Buddha, one of his final temptations, in essence, was duty. This is a man who left his family, who left his kingdom. You mentioned like duty as a father, all these sorts of things. He left them all to go find enlightenment. So this is offering a very different view on what spirituality is. Could you talk a little bit about that with us?
Yes, Buddha's duty was not to his, not as a husband or a father. He had a what should I say, universal duty, obviously, because had he not left, Had he been remained in the palace, being a good son and a good husband, the whole world would have missed one of the greatest souls it has ever known. There's something totally different, isn't it? His duty was obviously to leave and go. That because that was his swabhava, his character was like that. His whole life changed when he was. The fact that he was brought up in a very, very peaceful and atmosphere in which he didn't see any of the dualities or the difficulties of life. Well, it was a shock to him when he actually faced that. So that brought a dramatic change in his personality. And that is what drove him to get up in the middle of the night and leave without a word, even to his wife and child. And that is, obviously, that was his patent duty at that time. Because had he tried to stop that, he would have been going against his own swabhava or his own nature. And he would have become a very mediocre husband and dissatisfied son and ruler. What way would the world have benefited from such a thing like that? So obviously his duty was to go forward and become a Buddha.
Well, that brings up a question for me, though, of how do people know then? Because I could picture someone perhaps in the space of Arjuna saying, well, I don't want to fight, I don't want to do my duty because my real duty is something else. I'm not meant to do this, and I know that the ego itself is constantly trying to find these little wiggle ways and barriers for us. Where it's very common where when we don't want to do something, we just create the reason why it makes sense not to do it. So Arjuna dropping his bow and saying, well, actually, I'm meant to go be a monk. How do we in our lives distinguish between then what is actually our duty and what is just our mind attempting to, I don't know the word I'm looking for here, maybe like to get flaccid and soft and to cower away from what it is that we need to do?
So that's why Krishna tells Arjuna, if you run away now, you're going to be a coward. You're going to be deemed a coward because that is exactly what you're going to do. Your duty is to face this righteous war. And if you run away, you're running away from something which is your patent duty. And had he allowed him to say, let us go then. Okay, Arjuna, we'll go and sit and go to the forest and meditate. He knows Arjuna very well. And Arjuna was a man of action, not a man of contemplation. Arjuna in the forest would have been shooting arrows at the deer or the tigers or whatever. And his mind would have been seething with desire for revenge against these Kauravas, who he had under his very hands and whom he let loose. So how would that help Arjuna in his evolution? His spiritual evolution will be totally down. And that is the criterion we must judge for ourselves. By my running away from this, my ego, is it my ego who's prompting me to run away? Or is it really something which will not bring me any spiritual benefit? Because always here, the benefit to be gained is always spiritual benefit, not benefit. We are all, we run away from things because we think that job will pay us better than this job, or that job is so much easier, less hours. These are the things which tempt us to run away from our duty. So we should analyze that by ourselves. That analysis should be there. Why? What is the reason for my running away from this? Is it because I'm lazy? Is it because I want more money? Is it any of those hundreds of reasons which the ego can make up to prompt us into running away? But all these things certainly did not. I mean, in the case of Buddha, for instance, it's absurd to think that he was running away from his duty, because obviously the life he took after that was a really, really difficult life before he gained enlightenment. So you can understand it is not his ego which was prompting him, as it prompts most of us, and we have to analyze this ourselves. or we can beg God to help us to find out our particular, slot in life, because all of us we are all very, very important. There's no bolt or nut in the whole machine which can be considered less important or more important. All of us have some role to play in this life. And that role should be something which will lead us to some unselfishness, something which we can give to the world, benefit the world, not just ourselves. That is the criterion of judging whether it's your ego which is prompting you, ego which is making you lazy, thinking of lazy, some arguments which pamper your laziness, or what is it? So one has to judge for oneself: is this my ego, or is this something which will actually benefit more people, myself, as well as always the criterion is all through the Gita. He will say those who will see everything equally, all those who will help everybody regardless of what the equality of vision in the outside world, equanimity of mind inside. These are the two ideas which he stresses throughout.
When you touch on a point that to me is one of the most central and important and impactful messages that is layered all throughout Indian stories and spirituality, is that the main distinguishing feature of, for lack of a more sophisticated word right now, like good and bad, is not so much the way that it's typically thought of in the West of the forces of evil and good, but because of the so-called the characters that in the West we would think are bad guys, they also get the boons from the gods. They're also very powerful. They're also great yogis. I think of Ravana, for example. But the main distinguishing feature, and the thing to go back to all the time, and you were just talking to it there, is that, am I doing this for my own self-gratification, or am I doing this for something larger than my ego, for someone else, or an idea, or a concept, or people more than myself? And that's where the true treasure is, not doing it for the self, which is the typical way of the ego, just to grasp for itself, but to do it something larger. And that is such a powerful message for everyone in their lives, to constantly, when you can, as you can, be doing it for that larger thing, the satisfaction of something bigger than yourself, rather than your own limited and personal needs.
Exactly. That's exactly the whole thing in a nutshell. Because the more we exceed the little self in us, we have two selves, really speaking. Our little self, made up of our own little mind and intellect and personality, and there's a larger self in us, which is a universal self, and which belongs to everything and everyone and everything, not just everyone. That is very important. The Hinduism, the only thing who insists that divinity is present in every creature and in everything: stone, stick, planet, drop of water, or even a stone or a stick or whatever. So everything is imbued with that divine spirit. So we are, as human beings, it's our role is always to share everything we have with as many as possible, not just for personal benefit. And if it had been personal satisfaction, all our great souls all the great like Ramana and Nisargadatta, and so many, we have Sai Baba, so many of these great leaders would never have come out because they live for others. It's not for the satisfaction of their own selves. Because these little selves, which is what all of us do, all of us have tried for the satisfaction of our own little selves. And that is why our work will not be a worship. The Gita's message is that work is worship. And when does work become worship? When we work for the benefit of everybody. And finally, when we work, as he said, that he takes Arjuna to a grander scheme, when we work for the sake of God, not just for everybody, for the sake of God, because we see God in everything. It comes to the same thing, to work for God and to work for everything or everyone because we see God in them. So it comes to the same thing. So that work is worship. He does not ask us to, as I said, to take up great vows, or he doesn't give us a lot of do's and don'ts and what is good and bad, because we live in a world of duality. Good and bad are there, whether we like it or not. Good and bad are there. Happiness, unhappiness, pleasure, displeasure, night and day. These are all there. And that is meant for us to enjoy the world. Duality is part of nature's method of allowing us to enjoy the world. Because if everything was always good, if everything was always beautiful, we will be bored stiff. We would have nothing exciting in this world. So it's only because of the duality that we actually enjoy and experience and like this world. So that duality has to be surmounted, actually speaking, in another greater unity which stems from God. That is true. But the fact is that there is nothing which is called absolutely bad or absolutely good. Nothing or nobody who can be cast into eternal damnation or eternal hell, because everybody is given a chance. Any amount of chances are given by a compassionate universe in order to help the person to grow. Otherwise, what is the use of, giving us one miserable little human life and expecting us to gain liberation in that life? And if we don't gain liberation in that life, we are condemned to eternal hell. This seems totally against all our concept of a beautiful, wonderful, loving God. How can a loving God ever condemn any of his creations into such a dreadful, hellish state? So in Hinduism, the fact is that everything has its, both goodness and badness. The asuras also have to be incorporated along with the devas into our life, because very often we find that we have to deal with people who act like asuras. Demonic nature is always predominant in some people, but they are also part of that divinity. This is something which is very, very strange to Semitic religions, because they always make a duality of God and the devil also. They're already, whenever you postulate a devil, you're already in the world of duality. And here we are expected to go beyond that, because the devil cannot exist without God. God cannot exist without the devil. Goodness cannot exist without evil. Everything goes, they are counter correlatives. Only if you know its counter aspect can we know this. For instance, a person who lives in the sun will not know the meaning of light, for the simple reason that he has never experienced darkness. So the world of duality has to be accepted by us as being part and parcel of the way that the world is made. So this acceptance is always to be seen in this thing. But that does not mean that we should not do our duty. If our duty is patently in front of us, supposing you see a person harming somebody else, it is your duty to go and give him, fight with him and see that he doesn't harm the other person. That is another aspect. But you do it without hatred of that person, but only dislike of his particular action, which is your duty at that moment to stop him from doing that. So these are the values, moral values are so amazingly practical, which are given in the Gita, so that with the result that any work which anyone does, it can be that of a maid or someone who's sweeping the streets, or someone who's doing the most according to some degrading work, even such a person, if he does it properly with true to his own conscience, that work itself is enough to evolve him to another state of consciousness. He does not have to practice yoga or practice puja. All these are external, extra things, which we do to help ourselves get into that particular mode of thinking. But even without all that, a person who does his swadharma, that is the greatest teaching of the Gita, that work is worship. So a person who does his swadharma without desire for the personal results of that karma or that work he is doing, because it is that desire for the result, desire for that personal benefit to be got from that action, which is binding us to the wheel of creation, the wheel of samsara, which is called.
Mataji, you might be kind of, in essence, building to it right now, and you've kind of just stated there, perhaps. But my question, and I know again, this is the Gita is so layered with teachings. But if we could take the central message, the biggest picture within the Gita, and distill it down to a more simple explanation, what would you say is the central message of the Gita?
Central message is definitely to do your duty. Your swadharma is your duty, which that should be done with perfection, without expectation of personal reward. That is the most important. Doing swadharma without expectation of personal reward, doing it as an offering to whatever you like, something higher than you, to the society or to God Himself. That action is dedicated to God Himself and without expectation of reward, because that reward is in any case is not within your hands. It is ruled by another cosmic law over which you have no control. But because of our worry and anxiety of what we are going to get out of this action, our whole life is spoiled. And if we simply do that, is all that the universe gives us only one right, and that is to do our duty. It does not give us the right to demand our wages. So that right, which is our duty, if we do to our perfection, in whatever place, whatever strata of society, or whatever type of job you're doing, if you do that to the best of your own conscience, that itself is an evolving thing, and you will be automatically going up the ladder of spirituality, is what he says.
So success isn't about climbing the corporate ladder, as it were. It's not something that will be there on the other end of a different career or a raise or anything like that. The fulfillment in life comes from doing our duty, wherever that is, whatever that is, selflessly. Is that?
Exactly, selflessly, and the attitude by which it is done. That's very important. More than the action itself, it's the attitude.
Well, and speaking of attitude, you had said a couple of things moments ago that I found quite profound and quite in contrast with at least the Western perspective, the typical Western perspective on things. And one of those is that it's the duality itself that allows for the joy, whereas most people think that it's duality that is creating the suffering itself or inhibiting the joy. Because there's sorrow, we can't have joy. And what you explained in the moments ago shifts that dynamic around quite significantly. And the other thing that you said that I found really profound was that you're doing this, like, let's say you see someone being attacked and you go to defend them. You're doing it without hatred for the person, because I think so much of the way that, whether it's politically or personally, people try to inspire hate in others so that people will do harm to them. And this isn't about hating people. This isn't about that type of thing. It's about doing your duty, and the whole point is not to have hate. There's actually a really old samurai Zen saying where, the person came up, and I'm remembering it on the cuff here, but something to the effect of, you've got these two people, and this one samurai is trying to egg on this other one, and he eventually does fight and kill the guy after the guy spit on him, and he feels like he's completely failed because he he did it because he was angry that he was spit on, and so everything else that he did was a failure. It wasn't a noble or righteous thing at that point, because or actually he didn't fight the guy. He walked away. Now I'm remembering. He walked away because if he would have struck the other one down at that moment, he would have been doing it out of anger and out of hate, and that's not the way to go about things. So he walked away from the battle because it was going to be out of that same idea of hate. And I appreciate that perspective of when if it's coming from that, then it goes right back to what you were saying. It's for our own personal self-gratification. I want to satisfy this feeling of anger that I have for this other person by harming them, and that's for me at that point. That's not for something larger, and that's such a huge distinction in how to interact and go about our lives.
That's exactly what the Gita says. You do your duty without expectation of personal reward. That duty, even sometimes it may take you to strange places, it may make you do strange things, but whatever it is, so long as you don't do it for some personal aggrandizement, for instance, then it is okay. That is a keystone. That is a question we always have to ask. Am I doing it for my own personal benefit? Am I doing it because I think I'll get this or that or whatever? Or am I doing it for the larger good?
For obviously the Gita was written a very long time ago, but its message is quite timeless. But for the modern person living out there in the world, living in the cities, surrounded by technology, surrounded by all this information and all of this stuff, what message can the Gita, on top of the things that we've already discussed, but how can this teaching really come into our modern lives as well as as it continues its impactful message throughout time?
You see, human nature has never changed. From the time of the hunter stage and so on, up till now, we have advanced technologically. Our brains have become big, but our emotions are exactly the same as belong to the Neanderthal. What do you call that?
Neanderthal.
Men and so on. Because we feel angry, we feel fear, we have jealousy, we have all these basic emotions are still with us. And we have never learned to control them. We have advanced technologically. We live in better houses. We have better cars. We have so many other things but are we happier is the question. And we will never be happier unless and until we learn to control these basic emotions. And these emotions are second nature, are part of our nature. So then the only way we can do is to live a life by which we love, bring in the word which is most bandied about the world, but even though we don't know the meaning of the word love, but still, the fact is that whenever something is done with at least compassion, if not love, that attitude changes that whole thing. You see, let's say, always give the example of a robber. He cuts off the hand of a woman because she's wearing some golden bangles, and she won't give it to him. The surgeon cuts off a person's hand because it's gangrenous, and if he doesn't cut it off, he will kill the man. So both are violent actions. As far as actions go, it's violent. But the attitude is what saves them. And that is the thing with the human being. Our actions are not the ones which are pulling us down. It's our attitude. So that attitude is what we have to change, is what Lord Krishna tells Arjuna. That attitude, when we do, and the easiest method of starting off on this line is do whatever Swadharma is kept there in front of you. You don't have to go somewhere to the States or somewhere to Australia to find your Swadharma. Wherever you are placed at that moment is the correct place for you, because that the whole of the universe has placed you there at that particular place and time. So you have to start from there, this moment, this place. You don't have to look out for something far away or what shall I think of as my Swadharma. You start off from where you are. That's all we are asked of us. We cannot really become great before we start practicing any spiritual sadhana. We have to start by practicing it in this minute, in this house, in this place where we're living. And that can be done only by cultivating that attitude of love and universality, by which in everything we see the divine, because that is the truth. Everything is divine. Everything is because who are we? I mean, even the actions that we say and do, we see, we smell, the five senses give us experience of the world. But who is the actual enjoyer of all these? Supposing that inner spirit or that prana is not in us, even though the eyes are so good, and they can be maybe transplanted to some other person, because once that person, the prana has fled from that body is only a corpse. It cannot enjoy the world, even though its sense organs, perhaps for some an hour or two, are still in very good condition. So that the idea has to be brought to the front of all of us, that it is divine everywhere, which is because of whom we see everything, we enjoy this world. So, if things are done for that, we no longer look at that man in front of us. Is he a crook? Is he bad? Is he my friend? Is he my foe? Is he beautiful? Is he ugly? Whatever it is my duty to him is to serve him if I can at this moment, and I do it. So this is the only type of action which is possible for any of us at any time. It's just no use giving us big commandments and do this and do that and do. It is just no use, because we may not be able to comply with all those commandments. But all of us can and must do whatever we are called upon to do at this present moment to the best of our ability. That is all that this merciful God can ask for us.
Well, and you say something that kind of sparks up just living here in the West and seeing the popularity of yoga as a practice and whatnot, and hearing you say that it's not about doing a practice, it's about living it in your life. And see it very often where in the West you've got a lot of people doing a yoga practice, a hatha yoga practice. And they think that that's the spiritual practice, but then in their lives, they're not living any of the principles or ideas or anything at all. The life is something else. It's something to get past, something to overcome, to go do more yoga. And this completely flips that around to say that practice isn't even important if you don't have your life together, and you don't need it if you are sitting there and fully present and embodied and living your dharma and doing it in your life in the moment.
Exactly. All types of yoga. The word yoga itself is wrongly understood in the West. Yoga to most people means something standing on your head or doing some weird postures. But yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means unite. So according to Krishna, any action which can unite you to that universality, which we may call God or energy or whatever, consciousness or anything, any action which can unite you to that can be termed a yoga. That means 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, 18 types of yoga have been mentioned. And any action which can, like for instance, if you share, you're eating some beautiful cake or something, and you see a child on this thing who's looking greedily at you, and you share that or you give that to him, that is yoga. That's also yoga, because you've shared your happiness with somebody else. So this is the great, amazing explanation or description of yoga which he gives. So any action which can do, yoga is not to be, if you're doing, of course, hatha yoga and so on, that is good for you because it releases stress from your body, and the body should be kept healthy in order to have a healthy mind, and which will help us to do our work properly and offer it again as an offering to God. So in that way, like any type of physical yoga or sort of other types of yoga, puja, for instance, or meditation, for instance, all these are good only because it will help you in your life, in your practical life, day-to-day life. Everything according to Krishna, spirituality has to have a practical, utilitarian purpose. To tell you to become spiritual because you will gain heaven after death. He says that's all rubbish. He says if there is a heaven, it has to be enjoyed here and now. And we can make a heaven of this world if we live according to these principles. That is why the Gita is a practical handbook for day-to-day life.
Mataji, I could sit here all day and just listen to you talk. I really appreciate your insights, for respecting time, both for the episode, and I know it's very late in India where you are right now as well. I think that might be a nice place to end the conversation. Where can people find out more about you? I mean, you've got, I know there's a website, vanamaliashram.org. You've got numerous books, which I really encourage anyone listening to go out and get. You've got those books through Inner Traditions, and you've got plenty of books that cover stories, but you've also even got like the book, The Science of the Rishis, and you've got amazing books that you've put out there. What's the best way for people that want to find out more about you or connect to your teachings to connect to you and get a hold of you?
These talks are going to come over YouTube soon, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And other talks were also there, but these talks have been, recorded. They may come over the, I don't know what other way. My books are the main things, I suppose, which can make people understand. And even my books have nothing to do with me, really speaking. Mm-hmm. It's all prompted by that particular deity about which it is being written. Well, and very little to do with it.
I hope you'll take this as a compliment. When I'm looking right here in front of me of a stack of 6 books, all written by you, all heavily highlighted and loved up by me. And I've having read all these, and they've been so impactful. Up until reaching out for this interview, I didn't really know anything about you, even though I had read all of these books. So I think that is a testament where the teachings come through so powerfully, so impactfully, but not in a way that is, a self-aggrandizement of you or anything like that. Although obviously, I mean, I'll give you all that praise because I've learned so much from what you've shared. But it wasn't until to reach out to this interview that I realized, oh my gosh, you have this amazing backstory, and you're this impactful teacher that you're living in Rishikesh, and you're teaching, you're giving daily talks, and doing all this amazing work and all these amazing social programs. So I'm thrilled by you as a being, and you as the work that you do. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you. But again, let me insist that I'm only an instrument of Krishna's grace. I mean, that is the teaching he gave Arjuna, be thou my instrument alone, O Arjuna. And that is his teaching, which I have always tried to keep before my eyes. I'm only an instrument, and I try to make myself a perfect instrument, but still the instrument should not be given any praise or blame either. The praise or the blame goes to that hand which has led me throughout my life up to this very present moment.
Well, I love that, and I appreciate that so much. So, Vanamali ji, I hope that we can bring you back some other time. I'm glad that the internet worked with us today and allowed for a nice, stable connection through speaking to you in Rishikesh. So thank you so much for being on the show today. Hopefully we can do this again. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have learned something new today, and that you have a very present moment. Thank you so much for listening. Namaste. Hey everybody, it's Ashton here with an announcement. We're starting a weekly contest giveaway over at Savannah Spirit. If you'd like to enter into the contest to win one of our weekly prizes, go to savannahspirit.com/contest. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast today, we'd really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes, left us a review, leave us some comments, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Also want to invite you to go check out Savannah East, which is the name of our blog and also the name of a Facebook group where I interact with guests and our audience. We'll post recent episodes up there as well as interesting articles relating to our guests and or the topics on the shows. And again, thank you so much for listening. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.